At 5:40 in the evening on July 1, 1944, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt reached for the telephone inside his headquarters at Saint-Germain-en-Laye, a grand chateau west of Paris that once housed French royalty. The last light of the day slanted through tall windows, illuminating tables overflowing with maps, grease pencil markings, and reconnaissance reports scattered like the remnants of a collapsing world. On the other end of the crackling line, over 1,000 miles away in the forests of East Prussia, Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel waited at the Wolf's Lair, Hitler's hidden stronghold. His voice trembled ever so slightly. He needed an answer he dreaded giving to Hitler, a leader who no longer believed in reports, only in miracles. 25 days had passed since the Allied landings of June 6. The Americans had taken Cherbourg, gaining the deep water port they needed to turn the invasion into an unstoppable river of men and machines. The British were smashing their way toward Cannes. German casualties were catastrophic. Entire divisions had been erased from existence, killed, wounded, captured, or simply swallowed by the chaos. Replacements were not coming. The Luftwaffe was gone from the skies. The front was deteriorating hourly. Keitel asked the question Hitler had been demanding for weeks. What should we do? Von Rundstedt paused, listening to the faint hiss of static. He was 68, the senior field marshal in the German army, a man who'd commanded armies under 3 governments and served the German state for over half a century. He had conquered Poland in 35 days, driven through France in 6 weeks, pushed into Ukraine in 1941, and had been defending Western Europe ever since. He had studied war his entire life, and he knew precisely what needed to be done. End the war, you idiots! What else can you do? The line fell silent. Keitel said nothing. There was nothing he could say. Von Rundstedt had spoken aloud the truth everyone in the high command privately understood but dared not utter. The war was lost. Continuing it would only determine how thoroughly Germany would be destroyed before surrender became inevitable. Within days, von Rundstedt was removed from command. Hitler replaced him with Field Marshal Gunther von Kluge. Though competent, he too would be swallowed by the hopelessness of the situation. Nothing would change. Nothing could change. And for 10 more months, Germany would bleed, burn, and crumble exactly as von Rundstedt had predicted. Millions would die, cities would become rubble, the Red Army would storm into Berlin, and the man who had spoken the truth would sit at home, watching each of his warnings unfold with terrible accuracy. But to understand why he said what he said on that July evening, we must go back to his origins, his upbringing, his worldview, and to what he witnessed in the critical months leading into the summer of 1944. Gerd von Rundstedt was born in 1875 into the old Prussian military aristocracy, a world where soldiering wasn't just a profession, it was identity, lineage, duty. His father had been an officer. His grandfather had fought Napoleon. Becoming a soldier was as inevitable as learning to read. He entered the army at 16. As a young officer during the First World War, he served on staff, mastering the demanding science of coordinating large formations, logistics, movement, supply, skills that rarely earn fame but without which armies collapse. After Germany's defeat, he remained in the tiny, highly selective post-Versailles army, rising steadily through the ranks. By the time Hitler came to power in 1933, von Rundstedt was already one of Germany's senior generals, steeped in tradition but not in Nazi ideology. He never joined the party. He viewed Hitler as an uncultured upstart, the bohemian corporal, yet he also believed, as many officers of his class did, that the army served the state, no matter who controlled it. He would fight when ordered, win when he could, and keep his criticism to private circles. And when Hitler launched his wars, von Rundstedt proved devastatingly effective. His forces crushed Poland in 1939, helping carve up a nation in barely a month. In France in 1940, his army group spearheaded the bold thrust through the Ardennes, emerging behind French lines and ensuring total Allied collapse. In 1941, he commanded Army Group South in the invasion of the Soviet Union, capturing Kiev in a massive encirclement that stunned the world. But he also saw, earlier than many, that the Soviet Union would not collapse. New divisions appeared constantly. The Red Army was battered, but not destroyed. Industry moved east. And in late 1941, when von Rundstedt ordered a retreat from Rostov, Hitler furiously dismissed him. Rundstedt had learned the price of honesty. Yet Germany needed him back. In 1942, he returned as Commander-in-Chief West, the man responsible for defending the Atlantic Wall from Norway to Spain. But the wall was a myth. Many divisions were understrength, undertrained, or made of conscripts from Soviet territories whose reliability was doubtful. Older men filled the ranks. Equipment was outdated. Air superiority belonged entirely to the Allies. Germany was bleeding itself white on the Eastern Front. Rundstedt was asked to defend a continent with troops that were shadows of their former selves. The fundamental problem was simple. Germany lacked the manpower, the tanks, the aircraft, and the fuel to stop the Allies once they came. The commanders knew it. But they disagreed on how to respond. Von Rundstedt believed in classic military doctrine: keep armored divisions inland to counterattack once the real landing site was known. Erwin Rommel, fresh from North Africa and humbled by Allied air power, believed the exact opposite. Meet the invasion on the beaches because German armor would never survive the journey from far inland. Both men had valid arguments. But Hitler, as usual, chose the worst option, splitting control between them and keeping key armored divisions under his personal command. Nothing moved without his approval. And so, on D-Day, June 6, 1944, as Allied paratroopers landed behind German lines, as 5 beaches erupted under relentless naval bombardment, as 156,000 Allied troops stormed ashore supported by 11,000 aircraft and nearly 7,000 ships, the greatest amphibious invasion in human history, German armored divisions sat still. Not for minutes. For hours. Hitler had stayed up late watching films at the Berghof and his staff refused to wake him. Meanwhile, the Allies poured soldiers, tanks, guns, and supplies onto French soil. By the time Hitler finally approved the movement of armored reserves, Allied fighter bombers were waiting. Columns of panzers that should have moved at dawn were now easy targets under the afternoon sun. Rommel's warnings came true. Rundstedt's fears materialized. And by nightfall on June 6, the moment to throw the Allies back into the sea was gone forever. The following days only deepened the catastrophe. Weather slowed Allied progress, but their buildup was relentless. German counterattacks failed. Divisions that Rundstedt hoped to preserve for mobile operations were instead chewed apart in static defensive battles around Cannes, a city that would become a graveyard for Germany's armored strength. Every destroyed tank, every fallen veteran was irreplaceable. Rundstedt and Rommel tried to warn Hitler at meetings in France and at the Berghof. Rommel spoke plainly. Rundstedt, at times, tried to remain diplomatic. But the truth was inescapable. The Allies held the skies, the railways were wrecked, reinforcements couldn't move, casualties far outpaced replacements, and the front was being crushed by mathematics, not morale. Hitler responded with rage, insisting that wonder weapons like the V-1 and V-2 would turn the tide, that jets would sweep the skies, that Allied willpower would crumble, that no retreat was permitted. When Rundstedt finally told him bluntly that the war in the West was lost, Hitler accused him of defeatism. The old Field Marshal returned to France knowing nothing would change. And so, on July 1st, when Keitel called to ask what should be done, von Rundstedt no longer bothered with diplomacy. He had watched too many men die for nothing. He had warned too many times. He had been ignored too many times. His answer, "End the war, you idiots," wasn't just a response. It was a verdict on a system that had become incapable of hearing the truth. He was immediately dismissed. His successor, von Kluge, quickly recognized the situation was hopeless. Rommel would soon fall under suspicion in the July 20th plot to assassinate Hitler. Too popular to be publicly tried, he was given poison and forced to take his own life. Von Kluge, overwhelmed by the collapse of the Western Front and fearing Hitler believed him disloyal, took poison as well. One by one, the commanders who understood reality were removed, by dismissal, by suicide, by execution. The system began devouring its own officers faster than the Allies could destroy them. And the war ground on. Paris fell in August. France was liberated. The German army in the West lost hundreds of thousands of men. The Eastern Front collapsed catastrophically under Soviet offensives. German cities burned under relentless bombing. By early 1945, the Reich was crumbling. And then, astonishingly, Hitler reinstated von Rundstedt. He brought back the very man he had dismissed, because there was no one left. Rundstedt returned, weary, ill, and fully aware that nothing could be saved. He presided over a collapsing front, opposing Hitler's foolhardy Ardennes offensive, the Battle of the Bulge, knowing it would fail. And it did. Germany spent its last reserves on an operation that achieved nothing but hastening defeat. By March 1945, after the Americans captured the bridge at Remagen and crossed the Rhine, Rundstedt was dismissed for the final time. He went home to wait for the inevitable. Germany surrendered on May 8. After the war, Rundstedt was captured, interrogated, and later charged with war crimes, mainly for transmitting Hitler's commando order. Too sick to stand trial, he was eventually released. He never wrote memoirs, never sought to justify himself, never offered explanations for his loyalty to a criminal regime. He lived quietly until his death in 1953. His life leaves historians divided. Was he simply a professional soldier trapped in a nightmare he couldn't escape? Or a skilled commander who enabled atrocities by serving obediently? Was he a realist who saw the truth clearly, or a man too bound by tradition to resist the state he served? Likely, he was all of these things. Human beings contain contradictions. War amplifies them. But what is undeniable is that von Rundstedt saw the truth earlier and more clearly than almost anyone else in Hitler's military leadership. On July 1, 1944, he understood with absolute certainty that Germany's fate was sealed, and that every further day of war meant only more destruction. He spoke this truth, and he was punished for it. The leadership continued the war anyway. Hundreds of thousands more died. Cities burned. The country collapsed. This is the deeper lesson of his story. Organizations that punish honesty guarantee their own destruction. Hitler's Germany became a system where reality was unwelcome, where facts were filtered, where bad news was career suicide, where leaders heard only what they wanted to hear. And when leaders surround themselves with people who agree with them, deny reality, or fear speaking truth, the result is catastrophe. Military, political, economic, or human. Von Rundstedt's words, spoken in frustration, exhaustion, and clarity, echo as a warning across history. End the war, you idiots! Not just the words of a field marshal watching defeat unfold, but the cry of someone trapped inside a system that had lost the ability to see the world as it was. A system that chose comfortable lies over brutal truths, and paid the ultimate price. If you found this story compelling, consider liking the video. It helps bring forgotten histories to more people around the world. Subscribe if you want to explore more untold realities of the Second World War. And let us know in the comments where you're watching from. This channel connects students, veterans, historians, and enthusiasts from every corner of the globe. Each of you helps keep these stories alive. Thank you for watching, and thank you for remembering.